Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Boone Bramwell, and today I will be presenting my national intelligence estimate on China's role in the fentanyl crisis and its impact on U.S. national security. This topic is timely, urgent, and complex. Fentanyl is now the deadliest drug in America, and China's role in supplying the precursor chemicals that make it possibly deserves serious scrutiny. Over the next few minutes, I will break down how the supply chain works, the intelligence and policy challenges it creates, and what steps we can take as a nation to combat this national security threat. Here are my key judgments. To begin, here are the key judgments that will guide this intelligence estimate. First, China is the dominant source of the precursor chemicals used to synthesize fentanyl. These are shipped to Mexico, where cartels convert them into pills and powders smuggled into the United States. The result? Over 73,000 synthetic opioid deaths in 2022 alone. Second, this crisis has surpassed the scale of a drug problem. It's now a national security threat. Healthcare, law enforcement, and border systems are overwhelmed. Third, geopolitical tensions, especially following Speaker Pelosi's 2022 Taiwan visit, have derailed efforts to partner with China in counter narcotics efforts. Lastly, the U.S. must act quietly but urgently through a mix of diplomacy, enforcement, and economic measures to disrupt this lethal pipeline. Why this crisis threatens our national security. This crisis affects every domain of national security. Public health is in collapse. Fentanyl killed over 108,000 Americans in 2022, the highest drug death toll in our history. Border security is struggling. Customs and Border Protection seized more than 19,600 pounds of fentanyl in the fiscal year 2024 alone, and the economic impact is enormous, estimated at 1.5 trillion annually. When factoring in lost productivity, law enforcement spending, and healthcare burdens. So this isn't just about drugs, it's about our sovereignty, security, and saving American lives. To understand the current situation we are in, we need to trace how we got here. In the 1990s and early 2000s, overprescriptions of painkillers like oxycodone ignited the opioid epidemic. As access to these drugs declined, many users transitioned to heroin. By the mid-2010s, synthetic opioids like fentanyl emerged, cheap, potent, and deadly. Today, the vast majority of this fentanyl is manufactured in Mexico using precursor chemicals from China. COVID-19 worsened the problem by isolating users, increasing stress, and disrupting medical care. Understanding how we got here where we are today with the fentanyl crisis is crucial. Because the crisis didn't begin overnight, and it won't be solved overnight either, the current fentanyl epidemic is the product of multiple waves of drug trends, regulatory changes, and international policy failures. I'm going to take a second here, and we're really going to go in depth with the timeline of China's role in the fentanyl crisis. So, starting back in the 1990s and early 2000s, which we'll call Phase 1, prescription abuse and the pill epidemic. During this time, pharmaceutical companies aggressively promoted opioids like Oxycontin as safe and effective painkillers, despite knowing their addictive properties. Doctors were incentivized to prescribe them liberally, and patients, many of them working class Americans dealing with injury or chronic pain, became dependent on these painkillers. This created the foundation for today's mass opioid addiction. By the late 2000s into the early 2010s, we transitioned to Phase 2, the heroin shift. As regulators clamped down on prescriptions, many users turned to heroin. It was cheaper, easier to find, and gave them the same high. Drug cartels quickly responded to this demand, increasing heroin production and trafficking into the United States. Then we come to Phase 3, the fentanyl infiltration. Starting around 2013 to 2015, fentanyl is a synthetic opioid that was up to 50 times more potent than heroin. It can be made in labs with chemical precursors and not grown like traditional heroin. Around this same time, U.S. law enforcement began noticing a surge in the fentanyl overdoses. Investigations traced many of the incidences to suppliers in China. Fentanyl was often shipped directly through the mail, mislabeled, or disguised as legitimate pharmaceuticals. In one high profile case, a teen in North Dakota died from fentanyl traced to a Chinese online seller. As pressure built, in what we'll call Phase 4, beginning in 2019, when China finally formally banned the export of finished fentanyl products, at first this seemed like a diplomatic success. US and Chinese officials even cooperated on enforcement, but traffickers adapted. Chinese manufacturers began exporting precursor chemicals instead, legal compounds that can easily be synthesized into fentanyl once they arrive in Mexico or Central America. These precursors were less regulated and harder to detect, and shipments resumed under a thin veil of legality. Then came a major turning point in cooperation. The breakdown of cooperation after Speaker Pelosi's visit to Taiwan in 2022. In retaliation because of this visit, China cut off all counter-narcotics cooperation with the United States. That meant that no more shared intelligence, no joint investigation, and no coordination on chemical exports. This diplomatic freeze came just as U.S. border seizures of fentanyl were reaching all-time highs. Finally, in the present day, cartels in Mexico using Chinese precursors are producing fentanyl at scale. They've begun using drones, cryptocurrency, and social media to traffic both product and money. Like we said earlier, in 2024 alone, U.S. Customs and Border Protection seized over 19,600 pounds of fentanyl, more than the previous 5 years combined. So this timeline isn't just a history of drugs, it's a story of globalization, technological adaptation, and our geopolitical rivalries with China. It shows how enforcement in one area will often lead to evolutions in another. And it also highlights why intelligence agencies must stay ahead of the curve. So, you might be asking, how does China enable fentanyl production? My research shows a troubling pattern. Many of the companies producing these chemicals are either directly owned or indirectly subsidized by the Chinese government. The Justice Department has indicated several Chinese chemical manufacturers. In some cases, over 200 kilograms of precursors were seized, enough to manufacture millions of lethal doses. Despite sanctions, these firms continue to operate using shell companies, aliases, and digital platforms to reach Mexican cartels. This raises serious intelligence concerns. Is the Chinese government simply unable to control this trade, or are they quietly tolerating it, perhaps even encouraging it as a part of its broader geopolitical competition with the United States? Here are the 4 key threats to U.S. security. Let's break the security threats down. First, public health. The healthcare system is drowning. ERs are overwhelmed with overdoses. Treatment centers are at capacity, and families are being torn apart daily. Even here at my campus, at my school, we have even seen recently them put Narcan at staging areas around campus. Second, law enforcement. Local police are struggling to keep up. Cartels are infiltrating U.S. cities, and fentanyl is often trafficked alongside weapons and human smuggling. Third, border security. We are catching more fentanyl than ever, yes, but we are also missing a lot. Drones, tunnels, and micro shipments make this drug nearly impossible to intercept fully. And fourth and finally, the economy. A $1.5 trillion toll is more than the GDP of most countries. The crisis is draining not just lives, but national resources at a staggering pace. Here is what we don't know. There are still major gaps in our understanding. Is the Chinese government directly complicit? Some reports would suggest subsidies. But there is no smoking gun to directly put the blame on the Chinese government. Second, are our sanctions working? So far, traffickers seem able to adapt. They just shift platforms or rename companies. Third, will new drugs emerge that are harder to detect or treat? Fourth, how do we deal with digital tools? Cartels are now using encrypted messaging apps, cryptocurrency, and even drones to smuggle fentanyl across the border, making it even harder for our Border Patrol to target. We need new tech and new legal tools to keep this up. US and China counter narcotics cooperation. There have been moments of progress. In 2019, US and Chinese investigators secured joint convictions of fentanyl traffickers, but since 2022, cooperation has stalled. The Biden administration tried to re engage with China in 2023, but saw little success. Any future dialogue must navigate the growing strategic rivalry between our nations. A new administration will face tough decisions. How to secure results from China without making concessions that will undermine U.S. interest. Border enforcement operations. Border Patrol has ramped up operations such as Plaza Spike, Apollo, Blue Lotus, Artemis, and Rolling Wave are just a few in recent years. These efforts have led to record seizures, but traffickers are adapting. Drones drop payloads across the border. Smugglers use minor border crossings or even northern routes from Canada now. We need smarter sensors, faster communication, and more border agents, trained specifically in synthetic drug interdiction. This isn't just a volume problem, it's a tech war also. Now let's talk about fentanyl distribution inside the US once it makes it past the border. Once fentanyl is inside the US, it spreads rapidly. The DEA, in their 2024 Operation Last Mile, revealed a nationwide network of cartel backed gangs and independent dealers. These networks often use social media and encrypted apps, such as the dark web, to recruit users and distribute drugs. Many dealers are even US citizens. Even money laundering has gone global. Cartels now rely on Chinese laundering organizations to move their cash back to Mexico. The lines between domestic and international crime have vanished. Policy options and recommendations. So, what can we do? I recommend a four-pronged approach. First, we must pressure China diplomatically to enforce real crackdowns on precursor exports. Second, we must partner more closely with Mexico to dismantle cartel infrastructure. Third, we must reduce demand here at home through preventative treatments and education. And fourth, we must use conditional sanctions to target firms that persist in fueling the crisis. None of these alone will solve the problem, but combined, they form a layered strategy to combat the fentanyl crisis in this country. Risk and limitations. We also need to be aware of the risk. If we sanction China without hard proof of state involvement, it could backfire, provoke retaliation, or derailing cooperation. We are already on unstable grounds with China as is. Cartels are highly adaptive. If we shut down one route, they will find another. And if we lean too hard on Mexico without offering support, we risk pushing them towards other partners. Every action must be part of a broader strategy that balances pressure with partnership. In conclusion, and final assessment, the fentanyl crisis is not just a domestic issue, it's a global strategic threat. With China supplying the chemicals, Mexico producing the drug, and US users dying by the tens of thousands, This is a supply chain of death. We cannot solve this problem by focusing on just one link. We need a blended approach, smart diplomacy, targeted enforcement, stronger borders, and real investment in saving American lives. If we delay, the consequences will be counted in body bags and bankrupted budgets. If you like this video and would like to know more about where I got my research, I will post my citations and resources below in the summary page here on YouTube. I will include a complete reference list in my written memo, and I'd also be happy to share it with anyone who would like a copy of the actual memo that I wrote for this class. Thank you for watching this video today, and if you got anything out of it or enjoyed it, please hit that like button. Have a wonderful day.